Alright, we've went ahead and prepped all the bad spots up on our 66 Mustang. Let's go in there. I have chosen to use epoxy primer sealer on this action. I was going to use self-etch prime, but after really thinking about it, self-etch prime is made for bare metal use. So we're not going to use that. That is a good alternative if you don't have any epoxy primer, but we're going to go ahead and stick with epoxy primer because epoxy primer is specifically designed to put on top of a painted surface to seal everything in. Okay. All right. We have now, hopefully, cross our fingers, fixed the problem. We were going to the big redneck show today. You can see it right here. Rednecks with paychecks. That's where we were headed. And it didn't work out. Didn't work out because of this situation. Work before pleasure when you're self-employed. I'm going to go ahead and clean my gun out. I'm going to wait approximately 1 hour. All right, 1 hour before I apply the paint. And when I apply the paint, which I'm not going to be showing you that, I just basically want to show you how to cure the problem. When you apply the paint, you want to put on thin, dry coats. Do not put it on thick. Do not put full wet coats. The first 2 or 3 coats you want to put on, you want to dust the paint on there. Because what we have done, we have now put sealer on top of clear coat. Remember, there was part of it that was clear coated, and when you do that and then you come back with reducer, because that's the whole situation, is that reducer. The reducer is what activates with everything else. So you want to make sure that you put on dry coats until it's covered, and then come back and put a medium wet coat, and that's it. Let that dry for approximately an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, then come back and clear coat it, and it should hold up. All right, it's actually around 6:30 at night, same day, and we ran into some serious complications. The epoxy primer did not work. I put the epoxy primer on, you saw that. I waited approximately an hour, hour and a half, went to blow some paint on it, and it started blistering up immediately. So, there's only one other thing you can do to fix that. And if that doesn't work, then you will have to strip it down to bare metal. And what I'm talking about is this right here, 2K primer. Alright? You can actually use this as a sealer. If you got a painted prepped area that's been sanded down, you can actually use your 2K primer as a sealer. And I should have thought of that before I put the epoxy primer on there, the epoxy sealer, because once that starts blistering and the effect is there, it's very, very hard to get rid of it. So what we did is I went ahead and mixed up some epoxy primer, not epoxy, some 2K primer, using only the hardener and the primer itself, and I sprayed it on there. I had to wait 2.5 hours, 3 hours to put the paint on. Let's go in there and check it out. I still got to put one more coat of paint on the vehicle. I'm sorry, clear. I'm sorry, I'm upset, I'm mad, I'm frustrated. You know the situation. You know what the situation is. Let's go in there and look at it real quick. And hopefully, when we look at it, I just put the first coat of clear on there. Nothing reacted. Nothing. And you can see that we went ahead and applied our paint. And now, once again, when I applied the paint, after I put the 2K primer as a sealer, I went ahead and dusted very thin coats on there. I put like 4 or 5 coats of paint, very, very lightly until it covered. That's the only way that you can do that, but it looks like it held out, and it looks like everything's gonna be working out. This was the worst door jam right here. This was the worst one. This is where we had a very bad situation. The whole corner blistered out and wrinkled up on us, so that came out really nice too. And then if we come over here to the door that I was actually using as a learning tool to show you the mountain that we climbed, we're gonna come over here and I'll zoom into that, and you can see that it came out very, very nice, and it looks like it's gonna hold out. So I have to apply one more coat of clear to this, and then we're done. Once again, if this wouldn't have worked with the 2K primer, because I ended up priming this whole door jamb here all the way to about right here, and then I went ahead and primed that whole area right there. Alright, and I'm telling you that this is one of the worst nightmares that you can have, because if this wouldn't have worked, then the next thing I would have had to do is remove the doors off of the vehicle, and I would have had to take aircraft stripper and strip the jambs down and get all the old paint off, and then I'd have to do the doors too. So very, very big job. Very big job. This is something that you do not, I'm going to say it one more time, you do not want to fall into this predicament of a situation like this. Believe me, this will literally ruin your day completely. Now, I should have went ahead and showed you what happened using the epoxy primer. And usually when you use epoxy primer, 99.9% of the time, that will seal it up. That'll seal it up. But when you're working with an old paint, and I'm predicting that this car was painted at Earl Scheib's. I've actually painted a lot of cars that were painted at Earl Scheib's, and Earl Scheib's used to have their own manufactured paint, and it had a certain smell to it, especially when you sanded it. And I'm thinking that that was an Earl Scheib's paint job at one time, and that's what causes this, is just cheap, very cheap, inexpensive paint. And it doesn't matter what you do, it'll just blister up and blister up. Before they came out with 2K primer, if the epoxy primer wouldn't have worked, then we would have had to go straight into stripping it down. I'm telling you now, you don't want this to happen to you. You saw the nightmare I had, you saw the mess we had, but it's now fixed because of using our 2K primer as a sealer. You understand what we're saying here? We're not using it as a sandable primer, we're using it as an epoxy sealer situation, if that makes any sense. Alright? The only way you can do that is it has to be paint ready surface. It already has to be sanded down and paint ready. And then you apply one, not anymore, one full wet coat of the 2K primer, and then leave it alone and let it dry. So we fixed it. We didn't go to Redneck with paychecks today. We still got Rednecks with paychecks going on tomorrow on Sunday. But we know how it is on Sundays when you got them big bashes like that. Most of the time, it's people packing their shit and leaving, and the party's over. So I don't know. It's fixed. It's done. This is Pete, my friend Pete, your friend Pete, trying to show you that you know, when you fuck up, you got to stand up, and you got to buck up, and you got to make it up. Not to the customer, but to yourself. If you have to give up to make up, then you need to let it go to do it right. Because if you're not doing it right, you're not doing it at all. And this was a perfect example that I had to do it right. I had to break down and dedicate myself to doing this, because if it wasn't dedication in this situation, the solutions would have never been found. This is Pete again, D.I.Y. Auto School, trying to show you that you're not the only one that screws up. You're not the only one that has problems. Believe it or not, I have problems every single day of my life. Every day. But I turn them into a challenge, and I overcome that challenge say this is the end, and we'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.
Thanks for watching D.I.Y. Automotive School. Classes don't stop till you know everything.